Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Andrew Bartlow. Andrew, excited to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Good to be with you.
Yes, absolutely. Excited to have you on. And of course, before we jumped into the interview, I want to read a little bit more about Andrew so you can hear about some of those awesome things that he's working on. And Andrew has 25 years of human resource and talent management experience. He is the co author of Scaling for Success People Priorities for High Growth Organizations. He has a master's degree from the top program in his field and has all the certifications you can imagine. Andrew leads Series B Consulting, which helps businesses clarify their priorities and align their organizations to accelerate their growth. He also founded People Leader Accelerator, which is the preeminent development program for startup HR leaders, and created a SaaS software product for small business owners. So, one of the things I absolutely love about Andrew is all the awesome things that he's doing. He's definitely the definition of a thought leader. I was listening to an interview, and you definitely got your 10,000 hours of experience. I think even from graduation on, and all the awesome things and organizations that you work with. But one of the cool things I read about is that he said he devours books like donuts, and he burns off the donuts with tennis. And I try to do the same thing. I'm an English major, but I don't burn it off with tennis. I try to burn it off maybe on the Peloton or something. But nevertheless, excited to have you on the show, Andrew. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Yeah, sounds great. And I think you're burning off some of those calories with that giant water bottle I saw you drinking out of. Huge.
Yeah, that absolutely might do it. It's my workout definitely in the morning, and it carries me a little bit through the day. So that is a good thing. Maybe I'll add that into my workout regime.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome,
Thanks for having
awesome.
me.
Yeah, excited to have you on. So what I wanted to do was kind of rewind the clock a little bit, hear a little bit more on how you got started, what I call your CEO story.
Yeah. Well, thank you. My career has been in human resources. I went through a master's program, the arguably the best master's program in the field. And actually, I don't know if we picked this up in my bio. I'll be teaching a class back at my own alma mater coming up
That's
this summer.
exciting.
I'm really excited about doing that. Yeah, Mastering Business Fundamentals, I believe, is the
Mm.
title of the course. So how did I get started? Really through the back door. I was a functional expert in human resources for decades, and then had a chance to branch out on my own. The company that I was the head of the function, head of the human resources function for, had a lot of success. Got acquired, changed its headquarters, and I pulled my parachute, and that gave me the flexibility to do my own thing. And so that started by writing a book, getting my thoughts on paper, and then trying to figure out a way to get those thoughts and those ideas and those principles that were hard won through decades of mistakes out to more people, and that led to my consulting and advisory practice, as well as a development program for other HR leaders.
Nice. I absolutely love that. And I was listening to an interview. I think speaking of tennis, as I brought up, you had a lot of experience with larger organizations, and I think even organizations that end up getting acquired in Fortune 500 companies. I think as well too,
Yeah,
and going back
yeah.
and forth to the more of those small, nimble startups, and that back and forth, I imagine provided a lot of experience and some of those maybe mistakes as well too that you kind of are able to share in your book and your work.
Yeah, it's interesting how many people seem to make a career on one side of the fence, but like tennis, I've been on both sides of that net, both at the huge enterprise organizations like GE and Pepsi and Wells Fargo, and also at a bunch of startups that most of which you wouldn't have heard of. They aren't around anymore, but many of which have gone on to have a lot of success as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. So I wanted to drill down and hear a little bit more on how you've taken that success and information and how you're kind of putting that into place now. Could you take us through a little bit more on what it looks like serving the clients for you now?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have changed my definition of success and my definition of service. I've been in-house, an in-house operator and practitioner again for decades, and now I view my role as supporting others to do that work themselves. So I think of myself more as an advisor or as an educator now, and so that's what I've built my products and my services around is helping others to figure out how to deal with the thorniest issues that I faced when I was in their shoes. So I just really try to put myself in other shoes and help them navigate through the choppy waters that I learned a lot from through making mistakes, and maybe those people can make fewer mistakes with my help now.
Yeah, that's huge, and I imagine like when you're going through those issues, that choppy water, those things aren't going the way that you want it to go. You probably feel a little bit more isolated, feel like you are doing it wrong, maybe even, and you feel a lot of that. I don't know what to do next, or even who to lean on. So I appreciate you being that advisor and providing that in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's you hear about a CEO or a founder being the loneliest job. Like you're alone at the top, often of a small pyramid, very small. Um, it's also lonely being a sole HR practitioner or the top HR functional leader, where there aren't very many other people that do what you do inside an organization. And who do you turn to for advice? Like you're supposed to be the expert with all the answers, and so now I'm kind of marrying those two roles, both as a CEO founder myself of a couple of different organizations, as well as an advisor and mentor and educator to those HR professionals that are still in house.
Yeah, that's huge to be able to kind of lean on that, because I think we sometimes forget that of course, you have the experience, the knowledge to get to whatever that position is, but how do you continue to sharpen the saw? How do you continue to get better? And I feel like a lot of what you do is to help kind of facilitate those conversations and the knowledge and the growth and the sharpening of the saw for those professionals.
Yeah, there's yeah, I think there's a gap. I think there's this big gap in terms of learning and development. You've probably heard of the 70-20-10 adult learning paradigm, where 70% of any learning you do is done on the job, and then 20% through self-paced reading, and maybe 10% in a classroom. I think that for that to be really effective, you've got to have the right content and the right cohort or right community, and I've seen this just yawning chasm. Or speaking of donuts, maybe it's the whole of the donut,
Mhm.
where you have the academic, research backed findings that you can get from a university or through reading a HBR article or an academic paper, and then you have these sage practitioners that, like me, have done stuff for decades and have some good stories to tell. But it's not often that people build the bridge between those two areas, and that's something that I'm very intentionally trying to do. Is keep one foot in what works. Well, actually, keep both feet in what works, but really based on the practical application as well as the academic and research-backed foundations.
Yeah, that's huge. And I imagine, like you mentioned, it being such a lonely job, or it could be a lonely job if you're like the solo head of, whatever that, position might be or is called within an organization. But I imagine there's a lot of stress, especially since COVID, I imagine, for people that are in these positions and seeing the come and going, that I imagine policy changes, just so much. It seems like it's kind of providing that stress. I don't want to say burden, but it may sometimes feel like that when you're kind of in that position.
Yeah, that's real. I've talked about this as the perfect storm for HR professionals, where everybody experienced a ton of stress with the pandemic and work from home and kids not in school, and all the changes that we were dealing with in our daily lives, and economic uncertainty as well. But for HR professionals, that was uniquely acute in that perfect storm of, once again, we were expected to be the experts at things that nobody had ever lived through before. Like
Mhm.
how do you deal with the world shutting down, and how do you deal with work from home and pay transparency and social equity issues being so much more pronounced in the zeitgeist, and compensation transparency, and all the other stuff that we were dealing with. It was a pretty unique perfect storm for the profession.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often say, like, we forget about the human aspect of business. And I feel like probably in thinking through like everything that you're saying, probably none more than probably these HR professionals, these HR experts probably have felt that more than anything else, where it's not just, show up to your job, do your job. There's so many different involvements, as I think more of that people have come out, for people that are within organizations and around
Yeah.
organizations, that I feel like, you have to I don't know if the right word is balance, but there's just so much that you have to kind of be aware of, I think, when you're making decisions or kind of creating and building out this aspect, this part of the company.
Yep. Yep, that's right. HR professionals, once again, it's a lonely job. It's a hard job. You're pulled between different constituents, whether it's a CEO, founder, executive team, employees that need service, need support, or looking for advocacy. Mid-level managers that are just trying to get something done. They're just trying to do what they need to do, and they need their own form of support and service. And there aren't enough groups out there that are looking out for each other, that are looking out for the HR professional. And that's one of the things that I've done my whole life, my whole career anyway. And I've learned about a lot more support groups and peer communities. I think of it less as, I use the word support group. I think of it less in the counseling arena and more in the term of peer community. Like, what are the practices? What are the policies? What are the methods that you use to identify what's most important when everybody wants something and it often conflicts and you're
Mm.
getting stretched in the middle. And so I, that's the sort of what I hope comes across as calm perspective that helps professionals that are walking in the shoes that I've been before, again, navigate these really choppy waters.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And is that a lot of what you're doing with the People Leader Accelerator, being able to kind of have those open dialogues and that the peer group that you talked about so that you can move forward? You do feel like you're not alone?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for peeling back the layers there. It's People Leader Accelerator is a really niche community, and that's one of the primary elements of our secret sauce is that it's so niche. It's not for everybody. It's only for strategic human resources professionals at investor-backed, founder-led tech companies. So
Mm.
that's a pretty small bullseye, especially in today's market where venture capital isn't flowing as freely as it used to. Um, so it's a really niche community. So it's people that are in similar jobs at similar companies, experiencing similar challenges. You go deep, you go really deep, where you're reading 100 plus pages a week. We have writing assignments and homework, and you're accountable to each other. And we never record anything in today's world of scalable software and sages on stages. We never record anything because we want people to feel really safe and really comfortable talking about their troubles, sharing what they're dealing with, and being able to let it all hang out. And that builds trust and that builds community and that allows people to learn faster, and learn in a much more engaged way. And so we always keep the cohorts really small. We've never accepted more than 10. I'll go past that this time. We're oversubscribed. I'll actually have to limit the cohort, which I guess is a good thing for me.
Right.
Um, but it's intentionally very small and very niche, and that makes it, I think, more valuable for the people that are part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think by niching down, as you talked about as well too, that really helps, to create that connection and a relationship and building and growth as well too. Is there a reason that you decided to kind of focus on that specific segment, or you felt like that was more advantageous or more impactful?
Um, yes, yes, I think it's more impactful. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, the
Right.
hotbed of tech and the VC community, and the bull run that's been happening for the past dozen years. Hopefully, it's not totally over. I've seen a lot of really questionable people practices and management
Mm.
practices in this war for talent. A lot of ping pong tables and succulent plants being mailed to people's home offices. Um, but those aren't the things that really matter. Those aren't the
Mm.
things that get people to join or stay or be more productive or make your company successful. So, growing up in some really good HR functions, I've taken some of those learnings and I've tried to marry it with the fast and frantic and chaotic nature of what I've also experienced in the startup and high growth world. And I think that you can bring some fundamental better practices. I won't say best because it really depends on your context, but trying to bring a firmer foundation to this startup world that I'm a part of. Partially by virtue of geography, and partially by choice, where I've spent now a dozen plus years in the startup and tech world.
Yeah, I think so many times when we think about making an impact, we can sometimes forget what's quote unquote in our backyard. But of course, being in that area, it impacts literally everything around the world, anyways, as you are able to make that impact. But what really kind of resonated with me is you talked about, in everything that you're doing with the accelerators as far as like going deep. And what you kind of described is that the ping pong tables, the maybe beer on tap, those things seem
Yeah.
like they aren't necessarily going deep. And I feel like there's probably a lot of maybe education, knowledge, awareness, maybe even from these leaders, these HR professionals as well, too, maybe everybody around organizations on what people really, I don't know if I want to say seek, but maybe even crave within organizations, and seem like you are bridging that gap towards that with that information.
Yeah, I think of human resources as internal management consulting.
Mm.
And that's how I've tried to practice it my entire career. And that's often the missing piece, where people might go deep on recruiting or on compensation analytics or on air quote culture. But that sort of internal management consulting, like how can your org deliver its goals? How can your organization and its people be effective? And that's something that lots of orgs have HR people, but then they hire high priced outside consultants like me or like McKinsey or Bain or BCG to come help them with that. But if you have the talent inside, and if you're an HR person that wants to be strategic and wants to be more impactful, there's space for that. Like you are uniquely well positioned to provide that sort of management consulting advice. And so, I think that's a huge opportunity, and I think it's often underserved. And we really focus through People Leader Accelerator on filling out that strategic element that so many people are looking for, but don't know what it looks like.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, which is again, why I love so much the work that you do, because it gets to the heart of it. And I think anytime you run a quote unquote marathon, which I say a lot of times, people are running, you have to and want to have those foundational elements in place, and by arming people in so many different ways through the consulting, the book, the accelerator, and so many different roles that you have. I think it's so impactful towards helping people to appreciate and even execute on those things that can, make an impact in organizations and beyond that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I'm at this point in my career. I'm now late 40s with decades of experience, and I still want to find purpose in my own work. And the purpose that I find is being able to support other people through their career journey now. So we get a lot of really fantastic feedback from the one-on-one mentoring that I do, as well as the People Leader Accelerator program, and we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The people are craving it, as I talked about before. So I love that people are knocking down the doors to kind of get into that. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. This is a little bit more of an app, a book, or even a habit that you have. But what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Boy, here's an oldie but a goodie. I think of the Franklin Covey concept of big rocks. And there's a really silly video in London that I remember with a guy with a strong accent and a big personality that was filling up a bowl with rocks and gravel and water and sand. And I've turned back to that multiple times. It, it's about prioritization. You have to figure out what those big rocks are in your life, in your profession, and get those done first. If you're not making intentional time for those most important things, for me, it's my little girls. I'll go pick up my girls after this interview. I'm much more intentionally spending time with my 8-year-old, my 10-year-old, and taking time off to have adventures with them than I ever did before. So there might be some personal rocks, or there's certainly some professional rocks as well. But if you're not prioritizing those things, they don't fit in the bowl. They don't fit in your waking hours. If you're just chasing after the last Slack message or the last email that came in, you really have to make some choices to make sure that the most important stuff gets attended to.
Yeah, and I think the intentionality of that is so powerful because I think we sometimes, for one, don't really understand the why of the things that we're doing. We sometimes get on that treadmill or just running around from thing to thing to thing, and we don't really understand or even check in to say, for one, is this like how I define success, as you kind of talked about? Is this how I'm, wanting to lead towards that? But definitely, we even see that within organizations where we get kind of caught in like so and so is doing X, Y, and Z, and we need to do X, Y, and Z. This organization is doing this, so we need to do that. But it's so important to kind of check in and have that intentionality in so many different ways in our lives.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. So it's not my concept. It's an oldie bit goodie through Franklin Covey, but boy, I share it a lot. In this age of personal productivity, and we're all doing so much to maximize, I think there's still a need for some prioritize. Um,
Mm,
and so it's not just about doing more, faster, better. Yes, let's do more, faster, better, but let's also make sure that we know what it is that we're working on. And that's something that I take to heart personally and make maybe more intentional or better choices today than I may have decades ago. And it's something that I work with individuals and organizations on as well. Is just be really clear about your focus and your priorities, and you're just a lot more likely to make progress.
yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like people might struggle with that aspect largely because maybe it's a little bit easier to say, let's just work more, let's put in more hours, more time, in this way, rather than taking the time and the space to really say, what are our priorities as an organization? What are my priorities as an individual? And what does that look like? Because it can be different than somebody else or this other person or this other organization.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. Like peeling back a layer and understanding why, and it is special, especially in a shorter conversation like we have scheduled today. So the why, um, for individuals, like let's say HR professionals. So many HR professionals struggle with prioritization because a lot of us are pleasers. A lot of us
Mm,
are trying, entered this profession to try to help make people happy, and you get a mass of requests, not all of which are urgent, but might be urgent to the person asking for it. And we want those endorphins. We want to say yes. We want to transact and deliver and provide great customer service. And it can be harder for us to elevate a bit and think about, hey, is answering that email about a beneficiary change or about healthcare enrollment or about a performance management issue really the most important thing for me to do right now, or should I hold my 3 hour block of planning time so that I map out how our organization is going to meet its product roadmap? So for HR professionals, it's often because we're people pleasers and we get
mm,
sucked into the customer service transactions. For startups, it's a different reason. For startups, it's often this creative spirit, this visionary energy, where it can be really difficult to narrow that and focus on just the three things that we're trying to deliver. Because if you're a startup founder, and I am, um, you can feel like anything's possible, and you can feel like you're special and you're unique, and you don't want to constrain yourself by limiting to just those three things. And you're also really used to some quiet pivots. And you may not want to name the three most important things because they may not be the three most important things as you get more data and as you continue down the path. So it can be there can be some creative counter energy to limiting to three, and there can also be some fear in naming the
mm.
three if you have to pivot down the road. So there are different reasons for different groups, but still the challenge is that sort of clarity, focus, and prioritization.
Yeah, I appreciate you so much in drilling down on that, and especially the different perspectives that people have depending on where they're at, role, size of the organization, where they are along that journey, and what that looks like. Because those, considerations can be definitely different. But I also appreciate, and as would expect, that human part that you talked about, the fear part, where a lot of times people don't talk around those things, or the wanting to be able to please people and having to be pulled in so many different directions, and not wanting to say no because this is why you started and are in this
Yeah.
position. So pulling into those helps us to kind of maybe understand, maybe arm us with the ability to make sure we are taking care of those rocks and put them in the right place as we're going throughout our journeys.
Yeah, if we understand our own motivations and the pushes and pulls, then we can, try to have an out of body experience and just observe, like, is this the right thing? Do I
Right.
need to respond this way? The way my muscle memory or gut instinct is leading me, or would it serve me and my organization better to be a little bit more intentional? Would it serve my if you're a startup founder, would it serve my organization better to provide more clarity and more focus so people aren't running on conflicting projects? Uh, if I'm an HR leader, would it serve my organization? Would it make me more influential, more impactful if I wait 3 hours to respond to uh, this flood of Slack and email requests and do my planning and put together the program that's going to have a meaningful, lasting impact? Yeah, probably. So being aware of it is, I think, step one, and then that gives us the potential to decide to create some space and elevation to decide if we want to do anything any different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also provides that validation as well too, because I think you can, be in this feeling like, why do I feel like I'm overextended? Why is this happening? So I appreciate you again shedding light on that and what that looks like, what that feels like on a deeper level, because I think that allows us to again, be able to make better decisions, more in the future. So what would you consider to be what I call a little bit more of a CEO nugget? And you might have already touched on this. It could be something you would tell and give advice to a mentoring HR professional that maybe is getting started, or it might be something if you were to hop into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self, or potentially even one of those startup CEOs.
Oh wow, I feel like I have a wheelbarrow full of these golden nuggets.
Yes, a whole mountain.
Yeah, yeah, a whole mountain of nuggets. It's like a 20-piecer at McDonald's, a whole mountain of
There we go.
nuggets. Yeah. So much of what I've already talked about. So I'll try to focus for purposes of this discussion, and that is wherever you are in your professional journey, clarity and focus is tremendously valuable. You're much more likely to move 3 things a mile than you are 30 things an inch. And being thoughtful, making intentional choices about what those 3 things are versus just letting the 30 happen is much more likely to make you successful at whatever you're doing, whether you're a company leader, an HR professional, or just an individual trying to be a good dad.
Yeah, that's so powerful, and I think it goes back to kind of the Pareto principle, where sometimes we don't realize the things that we spend, the things that are making the biggest impact end up being not all the time that we're spending. So if you can laser focus as much as possible on that 20%, you start to see that that is providing the 80% of the results. You can start to focus a lot more of those resources, the time and energy, all those things towards that. And I think that's especially true, like you said, from a human standpoint, being a parent, but also as well too, like being a leader within an organization. It helps everybody row in the same direction. You get better and closer to your goal, and start to make even a bigger impact by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the challenging things for leaders, actually, let's peel one more layer back of the onion,
Hmm.
is that often the leaders think it's a lot more clear than their teams do. The further removed you get from where the decisions are made, and think of this as management layers, so the people that are on
Hmm.
your direct staff that maybe you're participating in leadership team meetings, they probably have a pretty good idea what your priorities are that you may have instinctively as a CEO. But the next layer down, the directs to your directs, or the third layer down, or the ninth layer down, if you're at a big organization, they probably have no idea. It's a telephone game that it keeps getting translated with a certain percent lost or misunderstood at every level. And yeah, you can do some direct communication through all hands or town halls or newsletters, but just really leaning into internal communication about what you're doing, what's important, and why, will help you align an organization. And for me, I have no real employees, but I have this cloud of friends and community members and faculty and adjunct and other partners that I work with. And I try to be really clear and communicative about what we're trying to do and why. And that just keeps people aligned better than they would be otherwise. It's clearer in my head than it is in theirs. And I need to keep reminding myself of that.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I think that's one of the probably the biggest parts about leadership, especially having, I'm gonna use the word ecosystem because you have so many things that you're doing to be able to make that impact, and that having that common thread to be able to see that, impact come to fruition. But we forget that again, we have that clarity, but we have to be able to kind of re-emphasize and re-emphasize again and remind and do all those things to make sure that that's communicated to the people that are on your team, to the people that are partnering with you, or even sometimes to just the things that we have around us, to make sure that you do reach that goal.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. I mean, that's what
Absolutely.
makes a team is you have a
Yeah.
common goal. And so just keeping that at the forefront and the ecosystem's the right word. Yeah, because we're all mutually supporting.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So, Andrew, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Oh, wow. All right. So the acronym CEO stands for Chief Executive Officer. And I won't do anything cute with trying to replace those words. But I think right at the center of that is executive. And that doesn't mean big business title in a fancy office with a big paycheck. That means execute. So a CEO ensures that execution happens. So being a CEO means you get shit done. Hopefully, we don't have to worry about my bad language
We're
on your
good at
podcast.
it.
Yeah,
I've heard
um,
worse.
yeah, yeah. So, what does a CEO mean to me? It means making sure that shit gets done.
Nice. I love that they get shit done because I think so many times we can get lost in the sauce, so to speak, and think about all the things that need to be done and getting the business done. But I love that the executive and getting down to the execution of the executive and how, as a leader, you're supposed to make sure those things happen and the ball keeps moving forward. Because I think you can get lost in the sauce. You can work on the wrong priorities, as we talked
Yep,
about before, and you don't end up getting to the reason you are there, the reason the people around you are there, and the reason the organization even exists as a whole. And if you're not doing that, then ultimately, what are we really doing?
couldn't agree more. Beautifully said.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Andrew, truly appreciate that definition. Of course, I appreciate your time even more. So, what I wanted to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best people can get a hold of you, get a copy of your book, find out about all the awesome things that you're working on.
Well, thank you so much, and really appreciate the conversation and digging deep, even in a short chat. Hopefully, it's useful for the listeners. Other things that might be useful for the listeners, I put out way too much content on LinkedIn. Look me up, follow me on LinkedIn, Andrew Bartlow. My book is Scaling for Success. My co-author, Professor Brad Harris, is the dean of the MBA program at HEC Paris, the best business school in Europe. So he knows what he's talking about. He's the academic wing of that work. So check out the book, Scaling for Success. And then if you're a people professional or if you know an HR professional that might benefit from some support and some learning, a peer community of how to be more effective, how to be more strategic, check out People Leader Accelerator. And then I guess the last, I work on a lot of different stuff. Like we've talked about this portfolio. I have a B2B SaaS product coming out in the performance management space. We're still in stealth. I'm working with beta users right now. But at some point in the not so distant future, on track performance, hopefully you'll hear about it, and will help organizations get more aligned, be more clear about who's working on what. And I think that just ties into our discussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge, part of the discussion. So I'm super excited. We'll definitely have to have you on so we can definitely hear more about it, when that gets out of stealth mode and becomes, unveiled to the world. But I truly appreciate all the awesome things you're doing. Of course, we're going to have the links and information in the show notes as well, too, so that everybody can follow up with you to make it even easier. But I appreciate you and all the work that you do. I think so many times we don't realize like how we can make an impact. We sometimes get so narrow minded and siloed and like, this is how we have to make an impact. But I love seeing how you become an expert and a thought leader in the things that you're doing, and you're able to share that in so many different ways. It just is a great reminder for us on like how being great and executing at the things that we can really help us and put us in that position. So thank you so much, my friend, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Thanks a lot, Crush.